but I'm grateful that I get a hold of you tonight because a lot has been going on in Israel, Gaza with this conflict, and now the peace deal. And it's a region and a topic that you are extremely knowledgeable about. And it's kind of caused a little, I don't know, stress this week. Mark and I had a bit of a disagreement, and I think he's probably right. But I want to ask you about your thoughts. Is President Trump to be celebrated, lauded for this peace deal? And is anyone else deserving of accolades as far as making this happen?
First of all, it's not a peace deal. It is a ceasefire agreement which resulted in the release of 20 living Israeli hostages and the return of the bodies of others.
So I thought it was a 20-point peace plan.
Yes, but Hamas hasn't agreed to all 20 points.
Okay.
And it's very important to point out there was violence today caused by Hamas, that the Israeli goal was the release of all the hostages. And that was the goal of Donald Trump and his team. And his team deserves great credit for what they did. But I want to be clear, it is not peace. It is an agreement to get the hostages out.
And that seems like it's been done for the most part. I understand that there are still some bodies that are of people that did not survive being taken hostage that have to be given back to Israel. And I don't know on the other side if there are other people that are still to be released.
No,
But it
it's
seems.
only it's only the 20 hostages, the bodies of those who were killed. Hamas is now moving to return those.
Okay.
Some were returned today. The Palestinians received an agreement, and many of those who were in Israeli prisons have now been released. There was a great deal of angst about that. Some of the key figures, including Marwan Barghouti, were not released, and that was a demand the Israelis had. But in the end, the important element, the most important single thing is that the hostages are out. And I want to draw
Sure.
this analogy. We Americans were held hostage by Iran for 444 days. The Israelis felt they were hostages, and they were, for 737 days. It is very important to understand that in Israel, everybody knows everybody else. It wasn't the impersonal hostages of America's situation, but you understand that in Israel, there was a general rejoicing, and they credit fully the efforts of Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio to ensure the release of these hostages. I cannot begin to tell you the feeling of euphoria that
Yeah.
gripped Israel, tempered with the knowledge that 2,000 Israelis were killed by Hamas, tempered with the knowledge that, in a sense, it's a deal designed to get hostages out, and that's what happened. That's the bottom line, pure and simple.
Mark said something the other day about President Trump being uniquely made for this moment. And he said he didn't think that President Biden nor former Vice President Kamala Harris would have been able to secure this type of deal. And I was thinking about all the diplomats in the State Department that have been working on this for so long, other countries involved. Canada has been given credit, the UK, also other countries in the Middle East, Qatar, Egypt. Do you think this is sole credit goes to Trump and his administration on this, or do you see that maybe it's a possibly more of a shared celebration for all those involved?
I give full credit to Donald Trump. I think his tactics, his direction, what he demanded, his ability to put together a coalition, very similar, I might add, to what George W. Bush did after the attack on September the 11th. The idea of being able to put together a coalition of nations. Now, the question you're asking about Joe Biden, more hostages were released when Biden was president. And you remember the hostage exchange.
Mm.
But I want everybody to understand very clearly that what was accomplished by Donald Trump and his administration is the release of the final 20 living hostages. The euphoria that gripped Israel, and you heard it in the Israeli parliament. Let me explain that Joe Biden was viewed as a great friend of Israel. Joe Biden declared himself a Zionist. Joe Biden was responsible for the release of most of the hostages. But what Donald Trump did was to finish the job, to make sure that the 20 living hostages would be returned. And it was very important in Israel that those who were murdered, who were still, their bodies were still there, were returned as well. And so he deserves the credit. And the next question you should ask me is, does he deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? And the answer is absolutely 100% yes. And let
Wow.
me be clear. Let me be clear. I am not a fan of Donald Trump's.
Mhm.
I don't like Donald Trump's presidency at all. But in this case, he was able to pull something off which is absolutely astounding. And I said before, I don't believe it's a peace deal, but what it does do is to take the hostage equation out. Now, you pointed out to me in our brief discussion before we went on the air that Hamas is already killing people. They're
Yeah.
already responding with violence
Well,
because that is what.
I'll read you what I had from in the newscast yesterday that that there are at least 6 people dead after the Israeli Defense Forces opened fire in Gaza, opened fire on several suspects approaching troop positions in northern Gaza. So they're urging residents in Gaza to follow instructions, keep their distance from IDF troops. President Trump is warning the United States will get involved if Hamas doesn't disarm. He told reporters that if Hamas doesn't disarm, in his words, we will disarm them. So I don't know if that means American troops will be getting involved or what happens, but this doesn't sound very peaceful.
There are American troops being brought in to enforce the entire deal. But again, I want to say, and I'm saying this with very measured terms, it is not a peace deal.
Yeah.
It is a ceasefire which allowed for the release of living hostages and the return of the dead. What the Palestinians got in return was the release of prisoners from Israeli jails. But let me be clear, Hamas has not recognized Israel's right to exist. Hamas has not agreed to lay down its arms. Hamas is taking revenge against those who they feel collaborated with Israel. And the problem is not resolved. Why do I give Donald Trump credit? Because, frankly, very few people believed that those 20 hostages still living would ever see the light of day. And in
You
Israel, they are rejoicing and giving Donald Trump full credit. You might not agree with Donald Trump, and I certainly don't, on much of
Mhm.
what he does domestically. I don't even agree with him on much of what he does in terms of foreign policy. And those of you who've listened to me over the years on KGO and here with you and in my own podcasts, I am highly critical of Donald Trump, but he pulled something off that is exceptional. And let me be clear, this is as historic a moment as when Arafat and Rabin and Perez shook hands on the White House lawn. That was not initiated by Bill Clinton, by the way, but it took place on the White House lawn. But let me point out, even that moment, which was a remarkable moment, or when Sadat came to Jerusalem with Menachem Begin, these were moments. They did not bring full comprehensive peace.
Yeah.
And I think that is what is so elusive. When Donald Trump threatens to disarm Hamas, I'm very skeptical. Uh, I don't think that Donald Trump wants to get into a ground war in which he is actually asserting American force against Hamas. Why? Well, the Israelis learned the same lesson. You can beat them down, but you can't destroy an idea. And the Hamas idea is the obliteration, the destruction of Israel. And the Israelis will never accept that. But now we take a deep breath and we pause and we say, 20 hostages are out. I don't know about you. I watched the family reunifications. And by the way, I
It's
watched as the
emotional. It's I mean, it's humanity at its,
I
at its
watched as the Palestinians
yeah.
were let go. These are moments for which Donald Trump deserves great credit.
Mm.
And he will be recognized when the history of his administration is written for that credit. Similar, let me just tell you, similar to Richard Nixon. Everyone talks about Watergate. Richard Nixon opened the door to China. Nixon was the one who initiated détente with the Soviet Union. There are things that presidents do which are overwhelming in their scope. It doesn't mean you excuse other issues.
Mhm.
And if you want, we can go into my real criticisms of Donald Trump, who I think is the worst president in many ways in American history. Certainly,
Yeah.
he's a threat to democracy, and I've said that repeatedly. But in this case, at this moment, he deserves full credit. In
You're
Hebrew, there's an expression, kol hakavod, kol meaning all, honor to. And that is what the Israelis are extending now to Donald Trump. All honor to Donald Trump for having succeeded in really doing an amazing thing.
we were earlier talking about why he was successful, and you said he's successful because he's a bully.
That's correct. He bullies leaders, nations, people to conform to what he wants. That's his method. It isn't necessarily a bad method, although you can say that when he has used these tactics as he is using them now in the United States of America, it's terrible. But in this case, look, he was able to assemble world leaders from diverse views to come to Sharm el Sheikh to basically not so much sign an agreement, but as to have an agreement that what Donald Trump did was the right thing. It is an important point, and let me remind people again, this is not the first time in history when an American president and the power of the presidency has been used. I think of George W. Bush. I will be at his presidential library in just a few days, and I can tell you that George W. Bush put together a coalition of nations after we were attacked on September 11th, very similar to what Donald Trump did to end this hostage crisis. And please note, I am saying again, a hostage crisis, which he was able not to solve for full peace, but to get 20 individuals out.
You say this isn't a peace deal, that it's a hostage deal. But do you feel like we have a shot, the world has a shot at lasting peace in this region in my lifetime? And you mentioned President Clinton, President Obama was working on Middle East peace, Carter, Bush the second, right? You've seen these deals, these handshakes, these moments that are supposed to be historic, and now we have another one, but it seems like every time there's some type of deal, you turn around and there's another war, there's another skirmish, which leads to something larger. And I'm wondering if you think that even though you say this isn't a peace deal, if there might be hope in this case.
No,
If
I don't believe so because the fundamental issues are not resolved. Hamas and the radical Palestinians object to Israel's very existence. They are determined to destroy Israel. They make that plain. The Israelis are determined to survive. They are not going to roll over and play dead. Part of the reason this deal happened is because of what Israel did militarily. It took out the Iranian nuclear capability, at least for the time being. It destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that was a major blow to Iran. It removed the threat of Hamas from striking again, and the Israelis hit very hard. And the Houthis in Yemen, who represent, again, a major problem, the Israelis have hit them. You must understand that what was accomplished by Donald Trump could not have been accomplished without what Benjamin Netanyahu, as Prime Minister of Israel, directed his army to do.
Mhm.
If Iran still had a nuclear capability, there would have been no deal at all. If Hezbollah had fired rockets on October the 6th and 7th, which was what was intended on October 7th, and they didn't. Now, in retrospect, a huge mistake, because in the end, Israel destroyed them anyway. So
Mhm.
what you had was a combination of factors. And to Donald Trump's credit, he's taken advantage of the moment. He's bullied nations in such a fashion that nations who I never thought would have stood up are now standing up. And I don't mean bullied in a negative sense at all. I want you to understand sometimes the tactic of being a strong president, of asserting authority, makes a huge difference. But I do want to point out that when Sadat came to Jerusalem and shook the hand of Menachem Begin, many people believed that peace was at hand. That when the Oslo agreement was reached, Rabin, Peres, Arafat, and when they received, by the way, the Nobel Prize for Peace, uh, there have been moments when everyone believed it would work. Now, Donald
Mhm.
Trump referred to a new Middle East. There is a book by Shimon Peres of that title. I have it right here on the shelf.
Mm.
The New Middle East, because that was the premise once Yasser Arafat shook the hand of Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres. There is a simple reality, and that is the passions are high,
Yeah.
the willingness to agree to a full comprehensive peace is necessary. But as long as there is a feeling on the radical Arab point of view and Hamas and many in the Palestinian national movement of never recognizing Israel's right to exist, the Israelis are going to continue to have to fight. And as for the Palestinians, no one, and I want to underline this, is talking about an independent Palestinian state, because everybody understands that if there were an independent Palestinian state on the West Bank and there were free democratic elections, Hamas would win. You know, Mahmoud Abbas is 88 years old. He's not in good health, and the Palestinian Authority is thoroughly corrupt. So you have to have a party with whom you can deal. And I would suggest to you that at this point in time, Hamas is not that party. And you will note that the United States and our coalition partners are saying we won't deal with Hamas. So that's the other great question. Who do the Israelis and the Americans deal with? And Mahmoud Abbas, you will recall, we, the United States, would not grant him a visa to come to the United States for the UN General Assembly.
Mm.
On the other hand, he was at Sharm el Sheikh, and so we have to watch and see. I mean, this is not easy. But again, I want to emphasize, it's not peace.
Mhm.
It's not even a new Middle East. It is Donald Trump exercising the full power of his presidency and getting the hostages out. And I will tell you, and I believe this, that no matter what happens, he will receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
I have a question about that, but before I ask it, I kind of want to finish this topic by asking you the particulars. If there's any information you have or anything you want to share about how this peace deal came together, whether or not you know or have read or have heard anything about perhaps the United States giving up anything or making separate deals in order to facilitate this, and how it all worked and gelled to kind of get where we are.
Okay, first of all, it's not a peace deal.
Right. I'm sorry. I
I
keep
want
saying
you
it.
to
My
take
apologies.
that
Yeah.
out of your lexicon.
Got it.
That's a ding word if anybody's
Okay.
listening.
We'll ding
Uh,
it.
it was a deal to secure the release of 20 hostages
Right.
and
Hostage release.
those Israelis who were killed.
Hmm.
And everyone agreed that that was necessary to begin a process. Let me tell you what wasn't identified. Who will rule Gaza? Who will the Palestinians have as their leadership? The president says he is going to chair a so called Council of Peace. Uh, it'll be very interesting to see how that evolves because Gaza is ungovernable on so many different levels. And where is the money going to come from to rebuild Gaza? This is another great question. And of course, What about the Arab world itself? Will they participate in this effort? And how the Palestinians themselves regard this. Look, uh, this is not easy for me to say that I give Donald Trump full credit. I
Mm-hmm.
give him full credit for this. As you can give Richard Nixon full credit for going to China, as you can give full credit to Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat for shaking hands and the peace treaty with Egypt, which has lasted. There are a lot of elements here. So credit where credit is due. And let
Mm-hmm.
me tell you, I've gotten a lot of emails blasting me for giving Donald Trump any credit at all. But he deserves it, and he will be recognized in history for that thing. One other quick point.
Mm-hmm.
Nixon will always be credited with opening the door to China. Nixon will also always be credited with détente. He'll be credited with the creation of the war on cancer. He'll be credited with setting up the Environmental Protection Agency. There are many things for which Richard Nixon will receive full credit. It does not diminish the reality of what Nixon did in Watergate and in other abuses of power. So I know it's hard for people to bifurcate. It's hard for
Mm-hmm.
people to separate, but we have to. So I participate every year in the Writings McIver survey. You've heard me interview Bill Writings on KGO many times. And there are 5 different categories. The president can rank in the lowest category in one element and the highest category in another. And that will be the way the Trump administration will have to be judged, the same as our judgment about Richard Nixon or any other American president.
So you said, and we'll go back to this now, that you think that because of this hostage release, I won't call it a peace deal again, although I will say at the bottom here, celebrating Trump as a peacemaker, you say that you think he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for his role in this hostage release. Do you think that Nobel Peace Prize should be given for one event, or do you think you next year they look at the presidency as a whole? Perhaps there are lives saved because of we know there are lives saved because of this hostage release. But what if there are more lives taken in the United States because of what's happening with brutal ICE enforcement? What if there are more lives taken with potentially unfounded claims of boats being blown up that are drug boats? Perhaps they are, perhaps they're not. We don't know whether they are, and people are dying. Perhaps there will be people who will die because they're arrested at no king's rallies or subject to brutal violence when the possible insurrection act is invoked.
I agree. I agree
I
with
mean,
everything you've said.
but what I'm
But
saying is,
remember,
can you separate that when you give a Nobel Peace Prize for someone who, on one hand, has saved lives and on the other hand has caused incredible turmoil, violence, and possible death?
should Yasser Arafat have received the Nobel Peace Prize, the man who was the most notorious terrorist in modern times, and yet one single action by Arafat caused him to receive the Nobel Peace Prize? Was it right or wrong? It is an ongoing debate. And all I can tell you is January 1st is the deadline for nominations. We are now approaching January 1st, just a couple of months
Yep.
away.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no doubt that Donald Trump will be nominated. And there is no doubt that there will be opposition to his receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. But I want again to demonstrate to you that someone who was once viewed as the arch terrorist in the world received the Nobel Peace Prize. I
Yeah.
want to remind you, Menachem Begin was viewed by many as a terrorist. He received the Nobel Peace Prize. I want to remind you, Anwar Sadat was the man who initiated a war in October of 1973. And yet, just a few years later, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee clearly doesn't like Donald Trump. So it's all speculation.
Yeah.
But he'll be considered for sure.
It is really hard to separate that anger as an American when you look around at what's happening to our country and celebrate anything about him, even though
Well,
I'm delighted that people are free and that that this horrible ordeal that they had faced has come to at least a physical end for them, if not emotional.
yeah, let me remind you, Barack Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize for a single speech, a speech delivered in Cairo. I analyzed it thoroughly on KGO. The speech did not result in a change per
Hmm.
se, but it was acknowledged as a moment in time. And I would suggest to you that is precisely how Donald Trump will be viewed, a moment in time.
Can we move to the National Guard troops and their potential infiltration, or I don't know, deployment to Portland, Oregon, to Chicago, Illinois? Those two deployments have been put on hold by the courts as they look at whether there's enough evidence to see if there's really some type of insurrection happening. And your thoughts on this and the possibility of an insurrection act being enacted?
Okay, first of all, let me point out that Mark Benioff in the New York Times
Yeah,
last
I saw that.
weekend proposed that National Guard be deployed in San Francisco. In
Hmm.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Uh, I find everything that Donald Trump is doing to be abhorrent. There is no insurrection in Portland, Oregon. There is no insurrection in San Francisco. There is no insurrection in Los Angeles. Donald Trump doesn't care. He's using the National Guard as he chooses. Now, one can ask, why didn't he deploy the National Guard on January 6th? And the answer is, oh, he says, that was Nancy Pelosi's job. Completely untrue. But Donald Trump is not someone who necessarily deals in truth. I don't want to shock you when I say that, but you know it's true. The courts have stood in the way of Donald Trump so far.
Hmm.
But all of these cases are going to go to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And let me point out to you that there are two justices on the court, Alito and Thomas, who are going to vote to uphold Donald Trump no matter what. There are two justices on the United States Supreme Court who are swing votes. They are the Chief Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. There are three liberal justices on the court who will almost certainly declare Donald Trump to be wrong on almost every point. And the balance will vote uh, generally in a conservative line. I would suggest to you the Supreme Court could vote 5 to 4 on major issues in terms of a president's power.
Yep.
So when I look at the courts and the highly partisan nature of the courts, and then I understand. You know that Justice Anthony Kennedy gave an interview in the last day or so to CBS, and he was very critical of the court because he said it has become too partisan. Well, there's no doubt about it. I have never
Mhm.
seen a partisan division on the court like this. And Donald Trump is placing his money, if you will, clear bet that in the end, the Supreme Court will uphold his position. He believes that. That is the strategy of the Federalist Society. They are saying to him, do what you want. And there is another point, and let me quickly point this out. When the United States voted, when the Supreme Court voted uh, against Richard Nixon, ordering the release of the tapes, 8 voted against him and 1 was recused. That was Bill Rehnquist, who claimed he knew everybody. Let me point out to you that Nixon had put 4 justices on the court. He counted on having at least 3 vote to uphold executive privilege. He didn't succeed, but we don't have on this court the kind of flexibility that we had when Nixon was president. So the Supreme Court is meeting now. They're in session. They reconvened the first Monday in October. Many of these cases are being fast tracked. And I want to remind you that Portland, Oregon is one of the cases
Mhm.
which the Supreme Court is considering. And so it's going to be interesting. Let me also just reflect with you that here in San Francisco, where I sit, that the mayor, the district attorney, uh, certainly the members of the Board of Supervisors are all opposed to any federal intervention on the streets of San Francisco. But ultimately, if Donald Trump were to decide to deploy, he has the power to do it, and only the Supreme Court would have the ability to stop him. That's what Portland is going after right now. What if he invokes the Insurrection Act?
Yeah.
This is profoundly disturbing because if you
Yeah.
understand the Insurrection Act, you understand that if the president invokes it, essentially he sidelines the courts unless the Supreme Court directly intervenes. But the federal district courts sideline. So this is a very dangerous moment for American democracy. There was a novel written when Richard Nixon was president called Takeover. Nobody remembers it but me. But it suggested that dark side. And Nixon believed that if the Supreme Court split on the question of executive privilege, he could defy the court. It was the unanimous decision of the court with the one recusal. He had no choice. But what if the court divides on a 5-4 vote? What happens then? Does the president have the power to simply say, it's a divided court, I'm the president? And if you understand the idea of a unitary presidency, which is promulgated by Trump and Project 2025,
Yeah.
which, by the way, he denied knowing about before the election
Yeah.
and now is embraced fully.
It's a playbook, right?
Yeah. So these are all factors in terms of domestic politics that need to be taken into account. May I also point out that the president has wide discretion. We are now in the third week of a government shutdown.
Yeah.
The president is ordering massive layoffs of what he calls Democrat programs, Democrat
Mhm.
people. This is something that every American should be very concerned about. I have never witnessed this kind of partisan action by a president of the United States. And what Donald Trump has demonstrated in the Middle East and beyond is this power. Let me tell you, he is meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday at the White House. Will he give, and I'm saying this, will he give Zelensky Tomahawk missiles? And what are the implications of that? And I'm pointing this out to you because when it comes to foreign policy, a president is a king. And when it comes to certain aspects of domestic policy, we are now witnessing a president of the United States who does not rule by Congress, with Congress, but
Mhm.
rules by executive order. And I want to point out to you that the House of Representatives, as of this moment, is not in session. And the Speaker of the House is keeping the House out, which means that the one new member of Congress
Yeah.
elected, who happens to be a Democrat, cannot be seated. And so when it comes to the Epstein case, the 218 votes required to release this absolutely will not happen until Congress reconvenes.
Let's go
So
back.
I'm sorry to throw all
No,
this out, but it's
that's
important.
okay. I kind of want to I want to go back to the Insurrection Act. I'm super
Sure.
concerned, as are you, about that. And I wonder, it feels like we're at his mercy, that should such an act be invoked, that there's really not much we can do. What do you see the best response from the American public being? Is that a moment to protest? Or if there's an insurrection act, are we all at risk of being killed or jailed or what have you? How do we respond to something like that as Americans?
We have to count on the court. We have to count on the Supreme Court ruling that there is no insurrection. And
But
let
they
me
won't,
assure
but
you,
we
the
already know
president,
they won't be there for us, John. They're
we
not.
don't we don't know. We
Mm.
do not know at this point. Let me point out the president has made statements that are completely false. Portland was not and is not burning. Los Angeles wasn't burning down.
Nope.
We understand that this president's language will also be clearly subject to discussion. And I understand all of the reasons why you are skeptical and why I might be skeptical, which is why I broke down how the Supreme Court might vote. But in the end, the only thing that separates this country from a virtual dictatorship is the court. And we have to hope that as the lower courts react and as the Supreme Court then must react, that they will do the right thing. If they don't, the whole nature of the American Republic changes.
Yes.
And I shudder at the thought.
Let's move on to Trump's retribution tour. The latest to be in the sights is John Bolton, who has not been charged with any crime. His lawyer says he didn't do anything appropriate in his home or have anything inappropriate in his home or his office after his federal government service. But he's now they're looking at some notes that he was making to himself in an AOL email account, writing summaries of
A
his
diary.
activities, like keeping a diary of
He
what
was keeping a
happened
diary.
while he was Trump's national security advisor and Trump part one, as Mark would say. I mean, it seems silly, but you have Bolton, likely Schiff is coming up as far as someone who's, they're trying to target for mortgage fraud. Letitia James now facing charges. All of Trump's, and I'm leaving Comey. You have this, he's angry at people that were not loyal to him, and he is now out for blood. And I just it's frustrating to see these people that are unfairly targeted, and I don't know, I don't know what we do about that unless we just recognize that, you know, that they're not criminals. But that doesn't do them any good when they're in jail, does it?
Well, let me point out to you, this is a campaign of retribution. I've told the story before the election. I sat with a very good friend of mine who assured me he was voting for Trump and there would be no retribution. It was pure election rhetoric. Well, we now know that Donald Trump was serious and that the Justice Department has been weaponized for the purpose of retribution. Pam Bondi, it's a disgrace. I mean, what can I tell you? I listened to her the other day and I couldn't believe what I was listening to. It makes my old friend John Mitchell sound like a saint. So, John Mitchell was Nixon's attorney general. I just want to point out to you, this is the darkest of the dark side of Donald Trump. And retribution is a terrible, terrible thing. Look what he's doing now. He's eliminating what he calls personnel who are working in Democrat programs.
Yeah.
For a president of the United States to have that kind of power, and that's what this shutdown gives the president. I am terrified, horrified, appalled, and I'm sorry that the Republicans do not have the guts to stand up and confront this man. He needs to be confronted. I expect John Bolton will be indicted. I expect that this is going to be a serious question. Now, the good news for Jim Comey is that he says he wants a speedy trial. And let me tell you, whatever the decision is, ultimately will be appealed to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So do you remember, Kim, in all the elections I covered for KGO, and I started in 1996 covering for KGO, I said we are not just electing a president. We are electing the future of the Supreme Court, the district courts, and the appellate courts. That is precisely correct. I always remember Shirley Breyer Black, who was Steve Breyer's aunt and who passed away several years ago. I actually had her on the air at one point, who pointed out that if Al Gore had won the election and become president in 2000, it would have been the Breyer court, and the whole direction of the American justice system would have been different. And that is absolutely true. Donald Trump now is putting people on the court who will be there for years and years. He's choosing younger, hardline, ideological conservatives. And frankly, he's packing the courts. And the legacy of Donald Trump, when he is long gone, and even if a Democrat is president, will be felt in these lower courts.
It's
And
true.
Donald Trump has placed a bet. He believes that the courts in the end will side with him.
Let's move to California. And redistricting, gerrymandering, Prop 50 voting is underway in California. My ballot has been turned in, and I know you said that you voted as well. The advertisements are coming in the mail, and they're coming on YouTube, and they're coming on TV and Facebook. How do you think this is going to shake out here in California?
Okay, first of all, let me point out that I supported Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor in the creation of the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. Their power was to draw congressional districts. I did it because I worked for Milton Marks when Milton was a member of the state Senate, who was in charge of redistricting in 1980, I believe, either 80 or 90. It happened twice. And I learned the corruption within that system. What Prop 50 does is to allow us to balance Donald Trump's plan, and he drew the plan for Texas, which would create 5 new congressional districts, which theoretically would be Republican.
Mm-hmm.
The answer was by Gavin Newsom, who is running for president. And Gavin Newsom said, we'll do the same thing in California. We'll create 5 new Democratic districts. And of course, it's happening in other states, as you are aware. Every day we get reports of different actions. But the important thing with Prop 50 is it would allow a one-time situation, because in 2030, when redistricting takes place again, the Citizens Redistricting Commission would be restored. I debated with myself. I really did. I argued with myself, and I was finally compelled to say that I am voting yes on 50. I am voting yes on 50, not because I like it, but because if the Republicans are able to redistrict Texas and there is no counterbalance, then the Republicans will retain control of the House of Representatives. And that, to me, would be very unfortunate.
I looked at it, and my husband and I had this discussion about why about how to vote, how you could vote no on this, because what other alternative is being offered? There is no other alternative. Either you vote yes on it, or you say, all right, Republicans, have your way with the midterms. We get that you're going to win it because you've managed to arrange it in such a way. You've
Well, if
managed to
I had been at your
fix it.
dining room table, I would have
Mhm.
explained that Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor, is leading the battle against Prop 50.
I saw it. I have
And
the form or the
and
mailer.
his reasoning is that if 50 passes,
Mhm.
it will change forever
It
what
won't
he
though,
tried to achieve with the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.
but it's
He's not,
temporary, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
It's only for this election. So I decided, after debating myself, and believe me, it was a wonderful argument. I'm equally persuasive either way. I finally decided the most important single thing is to vote yes on 50 to stop Donald Trump.
Right.
Otherwise, the Republicans will most assuredly control the House of Representatives for another, well, indefinite period of time.
And if there was some alternative, some legal alternative, some other way of getting this done rather than, taking this independent commission away, then bring it and show it to me. But
There
right
is no
now,
other
I
way.
don't see that there's yeah, this is it. This
This
is
is
the
the
only
choice.
shot. Yeah.
Now, let me
Uh,
predict to you that
okay.
California will vote overwhelmingly yes on 50.
Mm. What's
That,
interesting that you say that, because it seems like the messaging online and in my mailbox has been predominantly mailers saying no.
yeah, I have some of the
Yeah.
mailers. I could hold them up. I have them right here in my
Yeah.
hand. I can tell you that my sense is that the revulsion against Donald Trump
Mhm.
in California, and we haven't gotten into the whole thing with ICE and the whole business going on now, is so great that because it is a temporary action, only good till the next redistricting. And remember, this redistricting is unprecedented. We've always
Yeah.
done it every 10 years. But Texas chose, at Donald Trump's instigation, to redistrict now in order to give Trump additional seats in the House, or the Republicans, that is. And this is the alternative. The Democrats have seized the initiative. And for Governor Newsom, who plans to run for president, a resounding victory on Prop 50 will be a stimulus to his presidential campaign in 2028.
Tuesday at the White House, the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. There's an article this last night that I saw that said the United States is now revoking visas for 6 foreigners over Charlie Kirk-related speech online, pulling those visas. They determined that these people should lose their visas and their ability to be in America after reviewing their online social media posts and clips about Kirk, who was killed September 10th on a college campus. How did we get to a place where a person, a social media advocate for MAGA, is raised to the point of honor that free speech is tamped down, that people are
Because
kicked out
Donald
of the
Trump,
country, that people are fired, that all these things happen, and just support of one person?
because Donald Trump is president. Donald Trump has so politicized the political climate, I cannot even begin to tell you. Was the former Speaker of the House, who was gunned down in her home with her husband, was that recognized by Donald Trump?
In
No.
Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, Donald Trump's position is a clear one. He views this as a war for what he wants to achieve. And Charlie Kirk helped him win re-election in 2024. And Charlie Kirk's legacy is in support of Donald Trump. Nothing that Donald Trump does surprises me. Let me tell you the difference. Do you remember when Barack Obama gave John McCain the Medal of Freedom? Do you remember
Yes.
that?
Mm-hmm.
That was true bipartisanship. I remember when Bill Clinton did the same thing for Bob Dole. This is a different kind of president. This is a president, and he said it again today. I listened to the ceremony. He talked about how Charlie Kirk loved his enemies. And Donald Trump repeated for the second time, I hate my enemies. I
Yeah.
hate them.
Mm-hmm.
We have never had a president of the United States who makes those kinds of statements. It is horrifying to me, as somebody who has studied the American presidency, believes in the American system, that we have a president of the United States who is, frankly, out of control. And I believe this is very important. I know that you will probably play a little bit of the interview that Barack Obama gave about democracy, the wheels of democracy being off the road. I mean, it is so shocking, so appalling to me to hear what Donald Trump does and says. And it's not every so often, it's every single day.
Yes, it is.
It
Yeah.
violates every norm. How will midterm election voters judge this? Will there be some Republicans who say enough is enough? And let me ask you, where is the Republican anger over the fact that the House of Representatives is not being called into session? Why? Because they will then have the 218 votes to get an up-down vote on the floor of the House. This is a discharge resolution dealing with the Epstein case. What are the Republicans afraid of? What is Donald Trump afraid of? And so I'm anxious for the House to reconvene. By the way, the Republicans, what hypocrites. 3 occasions when the same situation occurred, Republican members elect were
Sworn
allowed to
in.
take their place.
Mhm.
This is unprecedented in the history of the Congress. It
When
is a
is it?
denial.
When is it? It legal? Like, when must Grijalva be sworn into
As
office? Is
soon
it
as
when
Congress
House convenes?
reconvenes.
So
Well,
they
that's
have
what
to. The
he's
next time
saying.
they, yeah. Hmm.
That's what Speaker Johnson is saying. I believe that is a complete misstatement of fact. As soon as you win an election, you ought to be sworn in. You're denying a district its voice in Congress. This is unprecedented. We've never had this happen in American political history. And although Speaker Johnson is getting away with it, history should and will note this egregious display of contempt for the rules of the House.
We don't see very often now people, uh, corporations, tech companies, universities standing up to Trump or demands from the Trump administration. But it seems like maybe in this one case, maybe there's unity in saying no. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, Department of War, what have you, wants every single reporter covering the Pentagon to sign a statement saying that they will not release or obtain any information that the Defense Department does not expressly allow them to obtain, which means they get to decide what reporters report. They
May I
get
ask
to
you?
decide the news.
I want to ask you, you're a reporter. If you were assigned
Was.
to the
Mhm.
Pentagon, no, you are still a reporter. If you were a Pentagon assigned by our station to the Pentagon, would you have signed
Mhm.
such a statement?
Never. No.
Of course.
I mean, it goes against a free press. What
And
I might
even
as well
Fox,
there's a difference between being a reporter and being a spokesperson for the Pentagon. I mean, they have spokespeople for the Pentagon. Call the media department.
even
They're going
Fox is
Yeah.
refusing. Even
No.
Fox is refusing to go along with this. There is
Yeah.
one right-wing source that says they will agree,
Right.
but this is the unified action of
Yeah.
virtually every liberal and conservative source saying they won't sign such a declaration.
The Wall Street
Bel-
Journal, the Washington Post, Newsmax, the Washington Times, every major TV network, including, as you say, Fox News, the Huffington Post, everybody saying, except OAN, is saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to
What
be
is
your
OAN?
mouthpiece.
Can you tell us what OAN is?
Some type of Christian right wing network.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is appalling. It's an attack on
Mhm.
American democracy. And for those of you who think I'm hysterical,
Yeah.
listen to what Fox is saying. Listen to what Newsmax is saying. Listen to what conservative commentators are saying. This is a violation of every norm in America.
Yeah.
And I listened to Wolf Blitzer, who was accredited by the Pentagon, describing what he went through during the Gulf War when he was at the Pentagon. He said, this is terrible. This is unprecedented. And so I have to tell you, there are many things that appall me about what the Trump administration is doing. This ranks right up there
Yep.
as being absolutely horrific. And I do believe in free speech and I do believe in a free press. And if anybody told me that I would have to sign such a document, believe me, I would have refused.
And I think for the most part, trained journalists have been, and maybe you disagree, but just I'm looking at the most recent example where Hegseth added the editor of the Atlantic, or a reporter, an editor of the Atlantic, to a signal chat where they
Jeffrey
discussed,
Goldberg. It was
yes, where
Jeffrey Goldberg.
they discussed a military action. At that moment, Mr. Is it Goldberg could have immediately released the information, but didn't. Knew enough to hold on to it for a few hours as the operation played out, because people that are trained know that you don't want to put American security, national security at risk, even if there's a story to tell. And so he managed to not mm, shake national security, but also to tell the story. And I think that's important, that you have to respect trained journalists to know the difference.
Yeah, well, Pete
Yeah.
Hegseth, who worked for Fox, by the way, who was theoretically
Yep.
a journalist, he's a disgrace. He has
Yeah.
no business being, and I want to be clear, He was confirmed as Secretary of Defense. Donald Trump can rename things all he wants, but it is still the Department of Defense, according to American law. And the idea that he believes he has the power to rename the Department of War, or that he has the power to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Well, and you can go down the line of
Yeah.
all these sorts of things. It is outrageous. It is egregious. It is wrong. And I don't care if you're a liberal or a conservative, a Democrat or a Republican. We have to call this for what it is. Just plain wrong.
Last question, because I know I've kept you way long, but I will ask you about the shutdown, about the threats against federal workers and programs that, as you mentioned, Trump called democratic programs or Democrat programs. Speaker Johnson is now saying he won't negotiate with Democrats. He's saying this could be the longest federal government shutdown that we've ever seen. And I don't know how this plays out, how people will be able to survive without certain benefits, federal workers without paychecks, and how what this means for America. The
Oh,
longer
it's a
it goes on,
disaster.
the worse it is.
It's terrible. I am
Mhm.
supposed to get a refund from the IRS. I talked to my accountant this morning. I'm not going to get the refund quickly and speedily and in our time
Yeah.
because of this shutdown. But let me assure you of one thing. The Republicans will feel the heat. They control the House of Representatives. They control the United States Senate. And this shutdown is on them. It's not on the Democrats. And Donald Trump and Speaker Johnson can say over and over again, it's the fault of the Democrat Party. That's what they call it, the Democrat Party. They can't
Yeah.
even get the name right. It's the Democratic Party. But let me just be clear. I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow morning. And I almost canceled the trip because how are air traffic controllers going to keep up with everything going on? I'm away for 10 days. I said to my wife, okay, we're going on this trip. We're going to a wedding. We're going to the presidential libraries. I want to make sure I can come home safely.
Mm.
So
Good
if
luck.
I were
Good
a
luck.
federal, yeah, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank God I have this machine so I can still talk to you and I can still do my daily podcast. I'm taking
Yeah.
my equipment with me so that I can continue to do what I do. But it is so shocking to me. And let me just point out quickly again, Donald Trump is waging a war against the University of California.
Yeah.
Look in this last week how many PhDs at the University of California received the Nobel Prize. And he's waging a war against academia. I am very proud of the fact that 150 Jewish professors at the University of California at Berkeley issued a statement, a combined statement opposing what Donald Trump is doing to try to use anti-Semitism as a fig leaf cover
Yeah.
for what is being done to gut the academic system in this state. Kim, nothing in my life would have ever prepared me for this kind of retribution, this kind of destruction. It is so appalling to me, and it should be to every American. Again, if you're a Trump supporter, you should be just as disturbed as I am. Can you imagine if a Democrat in the White House tried to do what a Republican in the White House is doing now? Why, the Republicans would be up in arms.
Yep.
It is the hypocrisy that we are witnessing now. So that's my view. It's a real battle. And what will be even more interesting in the weeks ahead is if Donald Trump tries to put troops onto the streets of San Francisco.
Yeah.
By the way, I couldn't believe Mark Benioff, a great
No.
philanthropist,
It
would
felt like
make
he
such
really
a
threw the
suggestion.
city under the bus, didn't he?
Well, he backed down a little bit and he said, well, what
Yeah.
I really mean is we need 1,000 police officers. Well, let me explain something to you. You take a look at the city budget here in San Francisco and the massive deficits we run. That's a pipe dream. And
Mm.
I really believe that this is going to be a major issue and it's one that needs to be confronted. And by the way, again, this may ultimately go to the courts. So we're watching all of this with great care.
John Rothman, safe travels. May your air traffic controller show up and your tower be fully staffed. And may you have a wonderful trip. And hopefully we'll see you next week, if not the week after.
And Kim, I want to thank you and Mark for affording me this opportunity. And I want to urge our listeners, do support the Mark Thompson program. Mark and Kim play such a vital role, and keeping the Mark Thompson program going and keeping Kim going, equally important. Thank you.
You can find John Rothman on his daily podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman. And I believe weekly you do a podcast on the Voice
No,
of San
daily.
Francisco. Daily,
Daily.
thevoicesf.org. I clearly haven't heard them all.
What?
Thevoicesf.org. I know, I have to go back, listen to them all.
Yes. By the way, when you go to the Voice of San Francisco, there's a line that says podcasts, and that is where you will hear my podcast.
Excellent.
And I want to thank you again. It was a pleasure, Kim. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.